Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. For week 3, we may have the running back apocalypse. It used to be the tight end apocalypse. Now we're moving on to that. We've got Drew Davenport from Football Guys, the fantasy football lawyer, and his auction brief podcast, all coming next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here with Drew Davenport. You can follow Drew on Twitter at Drew Davenport FF. Of course, you can check out his Patreon, Fantasy Football Lawyer, and his show, the Auction Brief Podcast. And of course, originally with footballguys.com as well. Drew, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Often I have you on talking auction strategy. I just want to get like a in-season discussion with you this time.
Love it. I appreciate the invite. I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, this is a hard week. I already feel like, every week's hard. Every week's weird. I get that. Me and Scott Pianowski say that all the time, but it's hard this week. It's really difficult this week. A lot of our assumptions have been challenged. And we have a lot of like uncertainties, and starting right off with my Bengals and Joe Burrow at quarterback.
Uh-oh.
Yep.
I lost you. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I lost you. Sorry about that. Yeah. Burrow, I'll tell you what, when I watched him week 1, I was willing to give him a pass because of the weather. And it was just a weird game where they got down. But his numbers just absolutely look terrible. It speaks to the fact that he was still struggling with that injury. Pro Football Reference has him 27th in adjusted net yards per attempt. So he just doesn't look like himself. His receivers are struggling because of it. It's just an all-around bad situation there.
Yeah, and I was reading up, they altered the play calling just to account for him missing the time, easing his way back. You could see him like in week 1 against the Browns on the sidelines, having him like attend to his leg during like anytime they're on a break and all that. And then after the last touchdown last week against the Ravens, he hobbles off. They say he tweaks the calf, and his status is up in the air for Monday night. And there you go. It's Monday night. So on one hand, you get the extra day to heal, but on the other hand, you don't have many pivots at all. At least there's 2 Monday night games instead of 1, but I'm kind of operating under the assumption this week we're not going to have them.
I think that's probably safe to say. And unfortunately, I'm operating under the assumption that he's going to be down for a little while.
Agreed.
I don't know that IR is a possibility, although I don't think it's impossible. But I do think that a couple weeks is within the realm. And when we heard them say, who was it? Jamar Chase said before the season, we don't need you back till week 5. It was one of those things where we perked our ears up and we thought, oh, well, that's just a player talking. But, these things linger, and a wet field in Cleveland was just a horrible start to the season.
100%.
I don't know how you can have any confidence right now in the Bengals. And, they picked up Cooper Rush, but he's still third. And so it's Browning at this point. I don't know what kind of faith to have in him, but maybe if he can push the ball down the field, maybe it's going to be a net positive for Jamar Chase, because right now his targets and his numbers look terrible.
Yeah, and that Chase comment's instructive. He took an extra week last year. Remember when he came back from his injury, he sat out the Tennessee game, took that extra week, and that was totally the right call. And it's almost always the right call when you think about it there, especially with lower extremity injuries like that. You see that all the time. And like you alluded to, going into that weather against the Browns front 4, no less, see Irv Smith whiffing on that block on the very first play, and you're like, oh boy, this is the sort of game it's going to be again in Cleveland. It seems like it's always that way in Cleveland. It's just bad news all around. And I think if Burrow does play, he's going to be compromised again. I think he'll be compromised for a while. I mean, this could last till December.
I sure hope that they do the right thing here.
Yeah.
And that's what you're saying about it lasting till December. I just can't stand. I understand the pressure. I shouldn't say I understand it. I'm not in that situation, but I get the pressure to want to get back on the field. I totally get that part of it. But somebody in the room has to be an adult and say, you can't go out there, so that they can just get it under control. The problem is, I don't know what that means for under control. I mean, a month, 6 weeks? I mean, what are we talking about here? I wish we had some more clarity, but Zach Taylor's not going to give that to us.
No, of course not. Most coaches don't. and many of them straight up lie to us too. So I don't have a whole lot of trust there. I love seeing the questions in the chat. We'll hit those up towards the end of the podcast. Thanks for throwing those in there, unless it's directly on what we're talking about at the moment. We'll hit up like trade questions and the like at the end here. Let's stay in the state of Ohio. Let's talk a little DeShaun Watson. I think that pretty mixed results so far with him. I like how mobile he looks. I don't think his throwing is consistently accurate. I know they kind of blame the weather for the first game, but I saw some bad underthrows in that first game. And then Monday night, we saw some baffling decisions, bad throws, fumbles. I mean, the second fumble was just a good pass rush, but still kind of like I'm not completely sold on him right now.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I expected to come out and see like a little bit of rust, but some progress. But I don't know that I've even seen that progress, because some of the throws that he made, and week one, he threw some one hoppers at his receivers. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's getting back into it. That's the rain. There's some kind of things you could say that give him an excuse. But again, what are we seeing where there's any progress? I'm not seeing the progress I want to see. And again, going back to one of my favorite quarterback stats, and that's Pro Football Reference, adjusted net yards per attempt. DeShaun Watson, 26th in the league, just terrible. And he had moments on Monday where he could make plays. Now, I will say this about Watson in his first 2 weeks. If these were weeks like 7 and 8, and he had been playing a little bit better up until this point, we might not panic as much. He had a weird weather game week one and a blowout. And then week two, he gets to go to Pittsburgh. I think I saw a stat that they haven't lost on Monday night since like 1991 or something like that. So that's a tough spot. And that's a ball hawking defense with a good pass rush.
Right.
But so I'm willing to say, okay, let's look a little bit further. And here's where the rubber meets the road for me with Watson. He's got Tennessee this week. Tennessee is a true pass funnel at this point. You can't run on them, and they're just giving everything up through the air. And it's pretty easy for teams to throw on them. So if I don't see Watson and Cooper have a nice, mesh here for 100 yards for Cooper and a couple touchdowns for Watson, I'm going to be legitimately concerned for the rest of the season.
100%. And it comes off the heels of last year where he looked terrible. And like 5 out of the 6 starts, he looked really awful. And so I can understand the angst. He does show a connection with Cooper. I will say that's one thing. If you have Amari Cooper, you're probably okay. I mean, he had a pretty good game on Monday night, despite being questionable in a game time decision. Looked actually pretty good, all things considered. So, I mean, there is some cause for optimism. And the pick 6 obviously wasn't his fault. That went right off of Harrison Bryant's hands. Bryant dropped another one early on in that game too. He needs a little help there. Njoku fumbled on his own. That was another one that's not can't pin on Watson too. These are all big plays in that game.
Yeah, and I was scrambling to find Watson's on target percentage here because I'd forgotten to look it up, but I'm not seeing him show up here in the accuracy rankings here for quarterbacks. I don't know why that is. Oh, I'm on the wrong season. This is great. This is
live
great
podcasting. All right.
Right. Live podcasting. I know but I know that this percentage is going to be terrible. Yeah, here it is. 24th, 63.8% on target percentage. Just terrible. He's just not getting the ball out. Oh, I'm sorry. He's 32nd. He is dead last, folks, in on target throw percentage at this point. That is just, that's mind numbing for a guy who has had elite throwing ability in the past. So we really got to see something against Tennessee, or it's time to hit the panic button.
Agreed. I mean, at least he's mobile. That helps. Another guy that we have to consider the panic button is Justin Fields. 2 awful looking starts so far. No, very few designed runs. I think there was 2 designed runs against Tampa Bay in the first quarter, and they didn't have one the rest of the game. He lost his left tackle, Braxton Jones, went on IR today. The short-term IR, at least. His left guard's out also. He's criticizing the play calling. There's not a lot of happy things going on in Chicago, and we haven't even gotten to the defensive coordinator situation there.
It is a mess, and I don't know how this gets better. This is not one of those things where I feel like we have some history, like with Watson. Okay, can we see something at some point? Or Burrow's injured. It's just we've never seen it from Fields at a high level. When he went off and went nuclear last year, it was really more about his rushing production. and how the offense looked better because he could run the ball. We haven't seen him be a good passer on an NFL level yet. So I know that there's a lot of argument about all this, but when it really comes down to it, just quite simply, what have we seen that tells us that he can succeed as an NFL passer? We haven't seen that. And again, I'll fall back on my Pro Football Reference stat. He's 30th in the league in adjusted net yards per attempt. It just is not there right now. His accuracy is not much better than DeShaun Watson's. He checks in at 24th with 70% on target percentage. I'm not seeing it for Fields. And in this situation, for fantasy, I think I'm okay because he's not a situation where he's got a short leash and they're just going to pull him. So I think for fantasy, he's fine. But I think that the book has been written already. I think the jury is in on Justin Fields and his future as an NFL passer.
That's depressing to find out. And this after they traded away the first overall pick, and I actually was in favor of the trade at the time. I actually thought that was the right thing. I thought I saw enough from him last year to be enthusiastic, and man, I couldn't be more wrong so far. And then now they hit the Chiefs on the road. This is a tough spot. This is a very tough spot.
It is, especially when he's a guy who takes a lot of sacks.
Yep.
And we saw last week how big of a difference it makes having Chris Jones back.
Absolutely.
And how much he was able to pressure the quarterback last week. So this is a terrible spot for Fields. I know that for fantasy purposes, maybe we can say, great, he's going to have to keep up with Patrick Mahomes, and the Bears defense is atrocious. But that's about all you can say positive, because this is a rough spot for a guy who takes a lot of sacks.
Yeah. A lot of people are going to take Kansas City and Survivor this week. I don't blame them. Just a question like what contest you're in. Like I'm in the Circuit Survivor contest where we have to have the special Christmas Day slate as its own week, and the Chiefs are one of the viable options with a home game against the Raiders on that 3-day slate. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, but the Eagles are also home against the Giants, and then the Niners have a viable game as well. So there are pivots, but you hate to save teams in Survivor, but at the same time, this is a pretty sweet spot here. It's tough to pass it up. I'll say that much. It's all not negative. It's not all negative here. Let's talk Matthew Stafford. This is a guy I'm only negative because I have some regret that I wasn't on Stafford more. I was more concerned about the health and losing Cooper Kupp, but he looks good. He looks spry. I saw him scrambling last week. This looks like the version that the Rams traded for.
Yeah, one of the more surprising developments is every time I look up at a Rams game, he's running.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's about, but I love it because he does look rejuvenated. I think that we should have made more of this, and I did mention it a couple times, but I'm not going to sit here and pat myself on the back for putting up the alarm because I didn't talk about it enough. But one of the things that we didn't talk about was last year his reps were really managed. The elbow was really bothering him last year. Mm-hmm. And he just came into the season last year with fewer reps, more injury issues. And last year was Sean McVay's worst as a coach offensively. So we should have talked about the fact that regression for Sean McVay meant that offense was going to be better than it was last year. And the fact that Stafford's reps were not managed this summer. In fact, he practiced a lot, and there was no mention of the fact that this elbow injury that lingered last year has had any problems this year. So we all missed that, I think. And right now, Pro Football Focus has Matthew Stafford as the 6th best quarterback graded out right now in the NFL. And I'm buying it because he has a trio coming together here in a couple weeks with Puka Nacua, the rookie that we've all been talking about, Cooper Kupp coming back, and then also Tutu Atwell is somebody that people aren't talking about enough. The guy's got 17 targets and almost 200 yards in 2 games. Atwell's playing very well. I won't mention Van Jefferson because he's one of the guys that I thought was going to pick up the slack, but he hasn't. But, Matthew Stafford, I tweeted out week 1, I'm watching him play against Seattle. And I tweeted out, we all forgot Matthew Stafford is #good at football. And it sounds stupid, but it's like, we can get carried away with the narratives in the summer. And I think we have a tendency to double, triple count things and just be like, oh, that offense is going to be terrible. Now Kupp's hurt, and then now this, and now this.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden we've pushed a guy way down who really shouldn't be that far down because we end up double or triple counting.
He's not bonding with his young teammates. He doesn't.
Right, I know he doesn't know their
them.
names. Yeah, all that. It's just silly, and we all missed it. And hey, here we are. But I think he has the chance to be a really good streaming option going forward with that trio. Boy, oh boy, that looks like a good offense.
I think this is the week you have to pick him up too. I don't think you can wait for more proof. I think this is wait for proof costs you leagues. And I think this is the week that you have to do that. I mean, especially football. Baseball, it's a longer game and all that, etc. Football, you have to go big and you have to go early. You have to be aggressive.
I totally agree. And people in my home leagues, it's kind of funny. I get the reputation of being a guy who really churns my roster a lot. And that's not always the case, but it is often. And because I believe in that you got to be aggressive early, and saving my fab for week 7 doesn't make a lot of sense for me if there's guys who are impact players that can help me now. And Matthew Stafford and that offense has been a fantasy goldmine for the early waiver wire.
Indeed. John Rubright says, I just dropped Watson for Stafford. Hope I wasn't too impatient. Maybe not. I mean, this is this is like a good test week on that for Watson, as you alluded to, with that pass funnel of the Titans. But at the same time, I mean, Stafford's not going to be around next week. I mean, people are going to grab him. I have a league where I've got Burrow and Richardson. Like, I need to get another quarterback in this league. I mean, Richardson was out there, and I only took him because of the upside. And I was like, oh, I really struck gold. Two rushing touchdowns, and now he's got a concussion. And all that. So,
well, the good thing for you is that's usually a 1 week thing.
Usually. So we'll see. The thing is, though, I need to be prepared. You need to have somebody. And Stafford's the perfect pivot. They play each other that game. So
he is. Hunter Renfrow has entered the chat too. So when he got a concussion last year, he was out like 5 weeks.
Right.
We don't know how that's going to go.
Exactly. Sometimes we think that, and it sometimes it's the most innocuous looking thing. Richardson played 2 series after the hit that gave him the concussion.
Yeah, it sounds like he's self-reported.
Yeah, exactly. So you never know. We have the toughest week in running backs, I think, in a really long time. But before we talk about that, you got to share a couple of commercial notes with our listeners here, and appreciate your patience on that. Our first note is from our friends at Rival Fantasy. If you're looking for a place to play head-to-head fantasy football games without the huge tournaments, salary caps, or complicated game types, then Rival Fantasy is where you want to play this NFL season. From a twist on a classic game with Fantasy Bingo, where players generate a lineup to complete achievements and get bingo, to head-to-head fantasy challenges, where you'll pick which of 2 players score more fantasy points, this is the best of fantasy sports. For the 2023 NFL season, Rival Fantasy is offering new users a $200 deposit match, plus a $25 first play voucher. Rival Fantasy is so confident you'll love the experience, they're giving you money to play out of the gate. Experience the future of fantasy sports on Rival Fantasy and become a rival today. Also, we are sponsored by Bettor Vision. I think we can all agree that fantasy sports are awesome. So is daily fantasy sports and sports betting. That's why I have so many accounts. What's not awesome is going to a bunch of different apps, find the best odds, and manage all of your fantasy lineups. Enter Bettor Vision. That's BETTOR Vision. Bettor Vision is the only app that syncs all your fantasy, DFS, and sportsbook accounts in one place. We only show you the best odds for every bet, so you'll always get the best value. And our dashboard is the only one-stop shop to track all your fantasy matchups, DFS picks, and bets. Use bettorvision.us to download Bettor Vision today. I'm Jeff Erickson here with Drew Davenport. You can check out Drew's Patreon at Fantasy Football Lawyer. Check that out, please. And you get a look at what Drew is doing. He's putting out a ton of good content. Let's talk running backs, Drew. I'm responsible for doing our value meter. It's our rankings, weekly rankings each week. I've been doing it for over almost 2 decades now. And this week is one of the toughest weeks I've ever had at ranking running backs. Between injuries and non-performance and just timeshare, I'm at a loss in some of these situations.
Yeah, well, it's just been it's been one of those seasons where, gosh, I can't even believe we're heading into week 3, and the number of top running backs that have gone down already is absolutely brutal. And not only that, but some of the replacements, like you said, are in timeshares. We don't know which side of the timeshare they're going to be on. See Justice Hill and Gus Edwards, that kind of thing. And on top of that, even some of these guys we're picking up now, they're stepping into brutal situations or brutal matchups where we can't even plug them in.
Yep.
So it's all just it's a mess. I'm happy to talk about any one of those situations, whatever you think is going to interest people.
Well, let's make this Cleveland cast. I mean, unfortunately,
Okay.
Nick Chubb went down and brutal injury and same knee as he hurt in college. The less said about the actual injury, the better, but he's out for the year. Jerome Ford looked good. He was the clear backup. Then Cleveland went and signed Kareem Hunt, 1-year deal. He's familiar with the team, probably should have a short ramp up period, at least in terms of knowing the plays, maybe not in terms of football shape. We'll see about that. But what, and then they play Tennessee, which for all the talk about them being a great team to use a quarterback against, it's an awful team to use your running back against.
Mm-hmm. That's my main problem. I actually tweeted out yesterday, go pick up Jerome Ford and then put him on your bench.
Yeah.
But I think it's true. One of the things that I heard a couple weeks ago that's just sticking with me is somebody was talking about Kadarius Toney and said, I'd rather have his upside on my bench than someone else's bench. And it doesn't mean you want to play him, but you want him on your bench. And that's kind of how I feel about Ford. I don't want to back off just because his short-term schedule doesn't look great. But yeah, he faces the Titans this week, who I don't want to start any running back against. And then he goes to the Ravens the following week. They have a pretty good run defense as well. And then he goes on bye and comes back to the Niners. So it is absolutely brutal for the next month for Jerome Ford. He's basically not usable. And that's so frustrating because you have to drop this monstrous portion of your cap or your fab cap. And here's my problem. We've seen this time and time again. And this is an experience thing. And it's anecdotal, so I don't want anybody, crushing me for this. But in situations like this, where now he's got a competition with Kareem Hunt, and then they've got Pierre Strong there, these situations oftentimes lend themselves to more of the passing down back, the guy who's going to be in the game catching short passes. That's a sort of a substitute for the run game.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is the team, they shouldn't do this, but they get an odd take on this running back. Like, oh, Ford struggled and we put him in and he struggled for 2 games and said, oh, this is more of a committee now. If he were to come in against a weak run defense, like say Chicago or something like that, and just crush it, then they might say, all right, he's our guy. But I'm afraid that by the time we get past this next month, the 3 tough matchups in the bye, that we may have a full-blown committee. And that certainly worries me. I'm not worried about Kareem Hunt, the player. I'm worried about what the coaching staff's going to think when Ford doesn't produce on the ground like maybe they think he should.
I think that's a great consideration. It's kind of the Joshua Kelley issue here as well. Like, are they going to turn to, Dotson a little bit more because Kelley struggled against Tennessee, or are they going to let him go against Minnesota? Eckler didn't practice today. We'll see about what happens there. But, when Brandon Staley says that Eckler has no, quote unquote, no timetable for his return, that can be interpreted various different ways. It can be skewed negatively, or it can be like, I just don't want to be put on a date.
We have an interesting development just now.
Oh,
Cam Akers has been traded to the Minnesota Vikings.
Dun, dun, dun. There goes my Ty Chandler speculation play there.
Yeah. Well, Josh Kelley this past week, I was really hoping to see them use him in the passing game a little bit to offset that tough run matchup. But he has not been used in the passing game. When he steps in for Austin Eckler, they don't use him the same way. And that's super frustrating because that's a large part of the value that Eckler has. Through 2 games, Kelley has 2 targets and no catches. And so I want to use him this week against Minnesota. And I think there's a ton of volume there. But if they're not giving him the passing work, there's really limited upside there. And he really makes more of a flex play than an RB2 even. And that's frustrating.
Agreed. They threw to him on the second play of the game against Tennessee last week, and it was not an easy catch, but it's a catch a really good pass catching back makes. A little behind him.
Yeah.
And some of that is just turning your body, getting positioned to being in that right position, so you don't have to go behind you. And I felt like after that, there's like, okay, he's not Eckler. A reminder, he's not Eckler. Okay, and then they kind of went away from that. After that. So I'm concerned about that.
That's kind of the same thing, that I was talking about with Ford.
Yep.
Like if they don't see it right away, they go, I don't know, he can't do it. And it's like the Aaron Rodgers thing. If he throws at one of these rookies and they don't catch it, then he just goes, yeah, I don't have any confidence in that anymore. And I
Mhm.
think they throw to Kelley right away. He makes a nice catch. He cuts upfield for 9 yards. Maybe that becomes part of the plan. He
Exactly.
didn't catch that ball and it was over. And now what do we do? Because
Right.
Minnesota's not an overly tough matchup, but if he goes in there and gets 15 carries for 70 yards but doesn't catch a pass and doesn't score, again, I don't want to mess with that.
Right. But the problem is with so many backs down this week, I mean, your
Mhm.
alternatives are pretty paltry.
Yep.
Barkley's declared out. Matt Breida against the Niners without their left tackle and left guard? No thanks. I mean, do I start
Yeah.
Rashawn Johnson because he's ascendant, but no left tackle, no left guard against the Chiefs? I don't know. You know,
Right.
there's the all these O-line injuries too that are hitting us pretty hard already this season too.
Yeah, it's been pretty brutal. Houston, same thing. They're having
Yeah.
O-line problems, and Dameon Pierce is struggling because of it. So, yeah, I don't want to play Breida either, and that's another guy that he stepped in, is going to be the RB1 for the Giants this week. But do we care? You know, I mean, I don't know how much they're going to really lean on Matt Breida this week. So, gosh, it is tough. And like you allude to, because of the number of guys that you can't rely on or that are down or hurt, Kelley is still an RB2 this week.
Yes.
But it's and you know, there's upside there with the touchdown upside. So I don't want to talk about it as though I think there's no reason to play him. There absolutely is. He is an RB2, and there is touchdown upside in this offense.
Yeah, there is. So you mentioned Cam Akers getting traded to the Vikes. Let's talk about that real quick. I think this is a vote of no confidence in Alexander Mattison. I really do. They felt like they needed to get another running back there. They added Myles Gaskin right after he got cut by the Dolphins. Mattison looked terrible in week 1, not just week 2. I think that's going to be. I don't think Akers gets much this week, but he's going to be part of the picture.
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And your take on it is what I would take away from it, that they have been looking for another guy. And I don't think that means that Madison's suddenly an afterthought. It just means that I think that we're looking at more of a committee. And certainly if somebody comes in and does what they want him to do, I don't think they're going to have any problem moving away from Mattison into a more of a backup role.
Right.
The one thing that I look at with these types of guys is what's their rush yards over expected. And that's a next gen stats number. Unfortunately, they've got the worst in the NFL, Cam Akers, minus 1.94 yards per attempt over expected. And then just ahead of him is one Alexander Mattison, 6th worst in the NFL. So I'm not sure that they've fixed the problem by going to the plotter Cam Akers. But the one thing that I saw with Cam Akers, and this is just something that I noticed as I'm watching, he looked different in that 4 to 6 game stretch at the end of last year. He ran with purpose. He ran north-south. He hit the holes hard. What I saw in week 1 really concerned me. And I was a guy who was pushing Akers as a perfect RB3 because of his price. And I saw the same guy that got him in trouble. So I think that what this ended up being, and this is purely speculation, but this is an educated best guess based on what I saw week 1. I think that the Rams told him, this is the type of runner you are and the type of runner we need in our system, and you have to run like that. And he goes up to the line against Seattle, and he's doing this. He's moving side to side.
Yep.
And he's not hitting the holes, and he's not going forward. Whereas Kyren Williams takes that handoff like he's shot out of a cannon. Even if it's not the right hole, he's hitting it hard. And that's what they want in LA. And Akers wasn't doing that. And he looks so tentative and he looks slow. I think that has to be why he's not there anymore. I hope that changes in Minnesota. But if he's the same runner, I don't know that Minnesota is going to improve his situation that much. But hey, if you've got Akers in a deep league, you have to hold him at this point and see if he's rejuvenated, maybe getting out of that building and getting a change of scenery. Maybe the scheme, the concepts there work for Akers better, and maybe he gets in a situation where he feels more comfortable and he takes that lead role. I think you can't dump him in deeper leagues, but in shallow leagues, I don't know why you're holding on to Akers at this point anyway.
Yeah. Question in the forum: do you drop Mattison now? No, I don't yet.
No.
But I mean, it's not great. I also don't want to start him. That's the problem. I mean, it's in that perfect spot of where he could have his wake up call like Akers did. This is Akers' second wake up call. That's why I'm kind of skeptical about that working out. But
usually one's enough if you're going to succeed. So 2 is probably not going to do it.
Kyren Williams to the moon now, though. I mean, he already is to the moon. I mean, he saw all but like one snap last week. Ronnie Rivers came in, gave him 1 carry, and then it was back to Kyren Williams. They're throwing it to him. I have him as a top 10 back this week against the Bengals. I mean, how many backs can we count on the volume? There's not that many.
No. And that's, I'm hearing people starting to nitpick at Kyren Williams, and it kind of makes me laugh. One of the guys that I've, has been picking away at Williams this week is Matt Waldman. And I love Matt. I trust Matt. And,
he's great.
Football guys trust Matt, implicitly. So when he says something, I listen. And his comment about Kyren Williams is he doesn't profile as the type of guy who can carry the ball for an entire season. But then he went on to say, well, guys like Justin Forsett have done it and proven that it can be done over a season. He doesn't believe in him long term, but that's more of a dynasty call. I think for the rest of the season, they found what they want. I don't see them doing a whole lot. Now, I think it's certainly possible because they don't seem to be very excited about Zach Evans. So I think that it's very possible they go out and end up with a guy like a Fournette or somebody like that, because Ronnie Rivers profiles the same way Kyren Williams does, as more of a more slight back who is more of a scat back or change of pace. And I think Kyren Williams is going to get the chance to do it going forward. We've seen immense confidence in him at this point. We just have to ride it. And I think that nitpicking away at what he may or may not be in 6 weeks, it just isn't worth it. Pile up the wins now, put him in your lineup, and go with it. And if we see some development that they're going to start to take it easy on him, or they want to bring in somebody, then we'll react at that time. But for now, you got to treat him for what he is.
I agree. One more running back situation. 2 actually. I got 2 more. 1, Aaron Jones didn't practice again today. A.J. Dillon in a pretty decent matchup with most of the volume, came up extremely short last week against Atlanta. I was very disappointed in what he did. I mean, I don't think I didn't have the highest expectations, but I thought if there was ever a week to start him, it was last week. And like that third and 1 run very late in the game could have salted the game away. And he just like stumbled into the line. Like, you're a big guy. You're Quadzilla. Come on, show it.
I don't know what's going on with A.J. Dillon. I have no answers. Going back to the next gen stats, he's 5th worst in the NFL and rush yards over expected per attempt, minus 1.22 yards per attempt. That's just an awful number. So last week he had a chance to show it. He gets 15 carries, only gets 55 yards. He only catches 1 pass. And one of the things that I really was interested in Dillon for was the fact that Aaron Jones is 29 years old and gets banged up. And we saw it right away. He pulls a hamstring. That's what happens with 29-year-old backs. And we have seen in the past that they're willing to give Dillon the bell cow role when Jones is out. And so he gets 16 opportunities and he can only muster 63 total yards and no touchdowns and just 1 reception. Super disappointing. 7.3 PPR points when Aaron Jones is out of the game is just not going to cut it. Now he goes in and has to face a tough New Orleans run defense. So Dillon at this point for me, in anything other than 14 and 16 team leagues, I don't believe he even belongs on a roster at this point. He's been so bad. And let's see Akers, Cam. I don't know what the heck is happening with his running style at this point. I'm not good enough to break down the film. That's not my thing. But when I watch him, it's almost like he's hurt or there's something going on because he looks freaking slow. He looks terrible. I don't know what's going on. Both Akers and Dillon, when I watched them, I was just blown away. It's one of those things where it's like, if you could fast forward and I could watch 3 snaps of A.J. Dillon back in August, he'd be off my board. And same thing with Akers. But you don't know that. And as soon as you see it, you go, yep, it's terrible. And Dillon, that's where he is right now. And I'm just completely out at this point. I've got him in a 14-teamer. I'm holding him, but that's it.
Yep. 2 other teams we have to check status on: David Montgomery and the Lions, and then Gainwell on the Eagles. About the Eagles, can they put the genie back in the bottle with DeAndre Swift? Got 2 touches in week 1. Even if Gainwell plays, how can you keep him so limited at this point in time? He clearly can play with this offensive line at least.
The results from the other night were nothing less than shocking. And I'm not going to say shocking because I don't think Swift has the chops, because I think he does. But week 1, I was very concerned about the fact that now he's got 2 coaching staffs that don't want to give him the ball when they have that opportunity to.
Yeah.
And then he steps up the other night and has a monster game. Pro Football Focus has him right now as the 7th best runner in the league, graded out through 2 weeks. The only concern for me is whenever he's gotten a significant workload, he's gotten hurt. Now, I'm not here to be the injury predictor guy. That's not the point of the comment. The point is there has to be a reason that these coaching staffs have seen him and don't want to give him a full load. He's a terrible pass blocker as far as I can tell, and that's a PFF grade as well. But you can't, to answer your question, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. You got to give him some touches. And if he breaks down, he breaks down, because he looked too darn good. You just can't stop that. And Kenneth Gainwell, there's obviously some things he does that the coaches like. And so that could be a pass blocking thing. I don't know that, but it could also just be a, hey, we can count on him to take the play where it's designed, and we can count on him to do the things that we ask a running back to do. And I'm guessing that's part of the problem with Dan Campbell in Detroit, why he shipped Swift out, is because the coaching staffs are looking at him and saying, we want you to do X, Y, and Z on this play, and you did everything but. So there has to be some frustrations there. I can only guess at that. But at this point, the performance that he turned in, I don't think you can put that back in the bottle. I think you have to go with it. And I think, though, that it turns into a timeshare, not necessarily Swift just taking over, but I think we're going to see a true 50-50 split.
Indeed. Let's move on to wide receivers. But quick note, we're on the Blue Wire Network. We always play their ads at this point. Thank you for your patience with that. All right, let's talk wide receivers. So Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, both of their stock is down clearly because of their quarterback situation. That I think we can acknowledge. I think the real question is how far down? Regress to what now? What sort of volume can we put on them?
Well, for Garrett Wilson, I said it as soon as Rodgers went down. I said, just get rid of Garrett Wilson. He wasn't productive with Zach Wilson last year. He had his moments, but I don't want anything to do with Garrett Wilson at this point. I don't want to put him in my lineup because, I mean, last week, as wild as it sounds, the guy catches a long touchdown and his value actually went down because he got 8 targets, caught only 2 of them. And 70 some of his 83 yards was the long touchdown. So I don't know how you can put him in your lineup and have any confidence whatsoever. Now they get the New England Patriots next. Do you really want to start him against Belichick and the Patriots? So it kind of just goes like that. Like, okay, well, when can I start him? When can I feel like he's a reasonable guy to have in my lineup? He's too talented to just say, okay, go ahead and drop him. But I always talk about roster spots and waiver wire bombs. I'm not saying you should drop Garrett Wilson, but I'm not saying it either. I mean, what do we really think we're going to see from Zach Wilson at this point? We know what he is, and the Jets keep saying that he's still the guy. So, but as far as
what would be a fair trade?
Oh, that's the problem. I don't think you're going to get one.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd get a Midland RB2 if I needed one. I would get a tight end if I needed one. I know it sounds silly, and I'm not trying to be reactive. I'm really not. But if you watch Zach Wilson, how much better is he going to get? I mean, he played a lot last year, and I think it's probably helped a little bit to have Aaron Rodgers in the quarterback room. And of course, experience always helps. But 8 targets and 2 catches, I'm not interested in Garrett Wilson whatsoever in any way. I don't think he's a buy low except in Dynasty. This is for redraft. I think his season's a wash, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I hate doing that. I hate saying it, but I think you're right. There's no one coming in either. That's the other thing. There's no one walking in there. I don't think Jameis Winston's going to get traded to him. Jameis Winston would be enough to make me excited again, by the way.
Yeah. Heck, I'd be excited if they brought Carson Wentz in. He knows how to get the football out. I'm not saying he's a good quarterback, but he knows how to throw the football.
Yeah. What did I put? I put Garrett Wilson at 19 this week. ahead of T. Higgins because also quarterback situation. Like kind of in that DJ Moore, Chris Godwin range. I you could go lower. I could see it. But it gets pretty sketchy there too. I mean, there's, it's just a lot of our, we've got my 4 guys all set. We're good here. Oh, that's been rocked. My world has been rocked already in a lot of these cases.
Yeah. Well, and Jamar Chase, he's got 17 targets, but he's only got 10 catches for 70 scoreless yards. Yep. Horrendous start to the season for him. And as we talked about earlier, how will that get any better in the next month? So I was in a home league. I put this on my Patreon the other night, but in a home league, a guy really needs a quarterback in my league. And so I've got Tua and Herbert, and he's one of them. And I'm looking at his roster. I'm like, I don't really love anybody on your roster. He's got Jamar Chase. And I'm like, well, I would love to trade for Jamar Chase, but I'm 1-1. My team is not lighting the world on fire. So can you trade for a guy like Jamar Chase at this point and say, I'm going to wait a month on him? If you can, great. If you got this like amazing team, go for it. Go to the guy who's got Burrow or Chase and see what you can do. But I want the Bengals to manage this right. I don't have the faith that they will. And even if they do, before the situation resolves itself, we're eating turkey and watching the Packers on TV or the Lions on TV. And I just think that is a huge gamble to make. Now, maybe it's sooner than that. Maybe it's, middle of October, end of October, or maybe he sits a week and he feels a lot better. I don't know. But do you want to count on that? Chase is at this point, that's tough too, but it's different than Garrett Wilson in that I can see it resolving itself to have it last night, 6 to 8 weeks at the end of the season, or maybe if you buy low now, he's a good target.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it really is like how strong your team is, and what sort of long view you're capable of taking. Short view, Puka Nacua. Everybody's favorite fantasy topic. Every radio show I appear on, I get a Puka Nacua question. I think they're gonna, even when Kupp comes back, they're gonna find a role for him. Still, obviously, he's kind of in the Kupp role, so that's gonna be a direct drop. But at the same time, I think they're gonna find a way. It's the question is what and when do you try to estimate when Kupp's going to come back? Because it may not necessarily be week 5.
It may not, and McVay, tells us untruths from time to time about. I'm trying to be polite, but he lies to us a lot, so we don't know what's going to happen. The one good thing I heard out of McVay's mouth, though, about Kupp was they shut him down just so that he couldn't push to come back quicker. And I thought, well, that's pretty good because you're managing the player by saying, now you're done now for 4 weeks. Now you have to take it easy. Yeah. So I'm hoping that means he comes back. So Puka at this point he's on pace for such a ridiculous number that, of course, we're going to see some regression here and maybe even Monday night in Cincinnati if Joe Burrow doesn't play. But right now, Pro Football Focus has him graded out as the 6th best wide receiver in the NFL. He's 8th in the league at 3.06 yards per routes run. Now, we don't have enough of a sample size for that yards per route run number to really be a locked-in indicator. But anytime you can play 2 NFL games as a rookie and have a yards per route run over 3, you know how to play football. His target market share is insane. He's at 41% for the season. That is incredible. So, or it might have been 41% week 1 and 38% week 2. I'm pulling those numbers off the top of my head. Sorry. But regardless, anything, above 30% is ridiculous. So I don't think he's going away when Cooper Kupp comes back at all. In fact, I think that it's going to impact Cooper Kupp more than it will Puka. But what I'm really seeing here, though, is I love Tutu Atwell, but there just aren't going to be enough balls to go around between Kupp and Puka. So I think that at this point, this is going to hurt me to say, but Puka's value is never going to be higher than it is right now. I know he's awesome, and I want to hold him. But I've got a home league where I'm just absolutely loaded with 7 really good wide receivers. I got no problem trading him if it brings you a really nice return, because the hype at this point for a guy that caught 15 balls last week is out of control. He's going to come back to earth and have his 6 for 30 or 5 for 41 or whatever. Dangle him out there, see what you can get. But I do think long term, this Rams offense is still setting up to be a barn burner. That's not something we thought we'd say, but here we are.
Yeah. Well, I remember another Rams offense that was a barn burner that people didn't expect at one point in time too. And people who were slow to react to that missed out on quite a fun year, but that happens all the time. Before we hit Kyle Pitts, everybody's favorite topic, we got to do one more commercial note. Sorry about that, folks. We're going to hit that up real quick here. Football is back. Kick off the NFL season with Vivid Seats and score tickets to all the hottest matchups and the biggest games of the year. Catch every pass, every tackle, and every heart-pounding play of your favorite team live and in person. And with Vivid Seats rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets and simply cash in your credit toward your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Plus, Vivid Seats is offering you $20 off your first $200 ticket purchase with code RotoWire. That's code ROTOWIRE. From the 50-yard line to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. All right, I'm here with Drew Davenport. You can check out his Patreon at Fantasy Football Lawyer. Kyle Pitts again. Here we are. It's week 3. He looked like there were some promising signs in week 1, and last week was a big nothing burger. They're throwing more to Jonnu Smith than they were to Pitts. I think they're kind of throwing over Pitts and Smith at the same time. I think one of my problems is I was unimpressed with the quarterback play, but it's frustration time again. Even at the discounted rate that we got Pitts sometimes in some leagues, I'm still really frustrated.
Yeah, and the same problem is still there that it was. The same 2 problems are still there that were there last year. And you alluded to one of them, that's the quarterback play. Because Kyle Pitts is still running routes on 90% of the Atlanta dropbacks. That's the number you want to see. You want to see him over 80%, as Dwayne McFarland likes to say. But he's over 90% in both games. He's got a 16% target share from the offense. But therein lies the problem. They don't throw the ball enough. So even a 16% target share is not getting you enough. He's got 8 targets through 2 games, and Jonnu Smith has 6. So, again, they're splitting up these targets here. And the main problem that you alluded to, the quarterback issue, 58% of his targets have been deemed catchable at this point. So, you're talking about 5 of his 8 targets have been deemed catchable. And that's just not a number you want to see. You can't see that number be in the 50s. We knew this, though, about Desmond Ridder. He's not necessarily a super talented passer. Now, he can get better. He can improve. But is he going to improve enough that catchable target rate's going to shoot up? And are they going to throw enough that target market share is going to matter? And I think he's going to have some nice games, but that's the problem with Kyle Pitts. He's going to have some nice games. He's going to make you hang on, and then he's going to disappear with 3 for 19. So he just, in my mind, he's the kind of guy, and I say this all the time, I'm quicker on this than most, but I love waiver wire bombs. I love dropping a guy like Kyle Pitts because there are people out there that can give me the production he can without the frustration. Guys like Logan Thomas or, Hunter Henry was a guy that you could out off the wire after week 1. Now you can't anymore, but there are guys like that out there who are productive tight ends. We'll get to a guy here in just a second when I talk about a streamer here, but there are guys that you can pick up. You don't need to sit there and wait on Kyle Pitts to ruin your season for 6 weeks before you decide he can't be on your roster.
Right.
So he's going to have some nice games, but let somebody else pick him up and enjoy that 15 points he gets and then be frustrated by the 3, 5, and 7 that follow it up.
I hear you on that. Who's your streamer that you're hinting at here?
The guy I'm looking at this week is Cade Otton.
Me too.
Playing on Monday night. Oh, hey guys, we didn't plan that. I promise.
Yeah.
Cade Otton, put up 6 for 41 last week. He's playing the snaps and running the routes that we want to see. Philadelphia has been super generous to tight ends so far. It's a small sample size, obviously, through 2 games. But hey, 6 for 41 in a PPR leagues, 10 points. That's exactly what you want out of your tight end. I think he looks like a good bet this week against Philly.
Yeah, probably be a lot of throwing to try to catch up. It was Hunter Henry's game in week 1 that opened my eyes to this possibility. I mean, you expect Hawkinson to do his damage, and then he did damage plus, obviously, but still, Henry, he looked great against them, and I was like, oh. So, I'm on board. Give me some lot in there for sure. Yeah. I promised some Q&A. Are you up for grabbing a few of these before we head out?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we got a lot of angst out there. A lot of people asking. So let's go into it. K9 says, should I trade Sanders, Gabriel Davis, and David Njoku for James Cook and Pickens? He already has Laporta. He lost Chubb.
Sanders, Davison, and Joker for Cook and Pickens. Is that Miles Sanders?
Yes, I would assume so.
Yeah, I don't know another Sanders, but I just sometimes
Colonel.
Okay.
I don't know.
I think I would do that. I mean, it depends on the rest of your roster, but I think I would do that. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, Njoku's not been performing like we thought, and that's tied to DeShaun Watson, obviously. Gabe Davis, you're trading him off of a nice game, which is something you want to do with Gabe Davis. So, Cook has been one of those guys that I was very nervous about. I tried to get some of him preseason just because I knew that if he was a guy that, that blew up, I wouldn't want to have none of him. But I like how they're scheming up some throws for him. I thought week one it was more of a check down type of thing, but this week when I watched him, they schemed up some throws for him. I like that. I love that they care about that he's getting the targets. That's never been a thing that the Bills do with Josh Allen, but they're doing it now, and that's what we want to see. So absolutely, I would do that.
All right. And he has Laporta, who I love. I really was impressed. I came away really impressed watching the rewatch of that game and seeing what he could do. KJ Frederick says, start two, Kelley, Gus Bus, Algier, or Kareem Hunt. I think we can cross off Hunt for at least this week. So Kelley, Gus Edwards, or Tyler Algier. Which two are you starting?
I'm starting Kelley right out of the gate. And I want to make sure that I know Atlanta's got Detroit. Yeah, I would not do that either. One of the teams that I think is underrated as far as run defense goes, and that's the Detroit Lions. They over the second half of last year, they were one of the toughest against fantasy for fantasy points against running backs. And I think that has held up so far this year as well. They were pretty tough against Ken Walker. If he doesn't put in a couple short touchdowns, Ken Walker has a rough game this week. Against a tough Detroit front. So I think it's weird. Dan Campbell made a couple shifts in the midseason last year of guys that weren't doing what he wanted them to do, and suddenly the run defense went through the roof.
It did.
So for me, it's Kelley and Gus Edwards there.
Yeah, and I saw some rumblings of Justice Hill being a little banged up too. So no Justice, some peace. All right, let's go to CD Smitty, who says, should I trade Mostert for Chris Godwin? Raheem Mostert, another sell high possibility here. This is like perfect kind of confluence of sell high here. Godwin coming off a bad game. What say you?
Yeah, I like where Godwin's at right now. So I absolutely do this deal. Raheem Mostert's the kind of guy who looks great for short stretches and then he gets banged up, or inexplicably Mike McDaniel stops using him. Last year that happened at various times. And also don't forget that Jeff Wilson's coming back in a couple weeks. And what I've heard is that he's coming right off the IR, should be ready to go in week 5. So I absolutely make that deal. Godwin's numbers haven't been what you want as far as like his fantasy production goes, but right now he's running plenty of routes. He's leading the team in routes run. He's still got over a 20% target share at this point. So there's really nothing more you can ask for. He got some end zone targets this week and just didn't connect. So Godwin's big games are coming. He's going to be fine. Baker Mayfield is playing, dare I say, very well right now. So Godwin's numbers are coming.
Absolutely. All right, let's keep rolling here. Hudson George says, need 3, full PPR, Ridley, Addison, Puka Nacua, and Drake London. Who's the odd man out here?
People are going to hate me, but it's probably Drake London, just because I don't like the inconsistency. The one thing I want to caution you about on 2 of these guys, I think you got to put Puka in there. You just have to until he cools off and we see something more like a normal player. But right now he's hot. Just you got to keep him in there. Ridley faces Houston this week. And one of the things I've been talking about is that teams that face Houston, they take a little haircut on passing yardage and receiving yards, because teams run the ball so well against Houston that and their offense has been so bad that nobody really has to do anything. And so their pass defense is right in the middle of the pack as far as like the talent of the defense, but just fantasy wise, you take a haircut there. So I'm not saying you bench Ridley, but just have your expectations managed there. Jordan Addison, the problem with him is he's still 3rd on this team in snaps and routes run. They like what KJ Osborne's bringing to the field. A lot of people are speculating it's blocking. So again, the hyper efficiency from Addison worries me. So if you're concerned about that, he only had 3 catches last week, but he scored in both games, even though he's playing 3rd. So if you're worried about that, London's okay. But my pick is London's the odd man out.
All right. Joaquin says, got quarterback Fields, running back Henry, Tony Jones Jr., A.J. Dillon, Jalen Warren, blah, 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 blah. It's tough to go through this when you're looking at a roster here, a full roster here. He just lost Nick Chubb, basically. He's like, what do you do for a running back 10-team full PPR? I mean, basically, if Tony Jones is already rostered in this league, you're already digging pretty deep.
Mm-hmm. That's the problem. And I don't know that I love Tony Jones anyway, because I think they're going to give Kendre Miller a nice long runway to get ramped up this week as well.
Yep.
So it's really hard to dig deep. The only thing I'm going to do there especially in a 10-teamer, if you're that deep already, is just I'm looking for some stashes, some guys that are guys like Bam Knight, those kind of guys who may show out, Gary Brightwell, something like that, where a guy, you can just put them on your bench and wait and see if they're going to become relevant.
I like that. I like that a lot. Let's take 3 more, and then we got to let you go because I'm under promising and you're over delivering. I said 45 minutes. We're at 55.
Hey, as long as I can get my haircut by 8 o'clock, I'm good.
All right. Good. I got mine last week, once every 3 weeks, just get it all down and mow it down and we're good. Captain Joking says, should I trade Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, and Sam Laporta for AJ Brown?
Ooh, that's a pretty heavy price. I will say that you're buying low on AJ Brown, and that's what you want to be doing. I don't care whatsoever about Garrett Wilson, getting rid of him, but I think Amari Cooper, like we alluded to earlier in the show, does have a connection with DeShaun Watson. I think better days are ahead for the Browns passing game. I hate giving up Sam Laporta there. Boy, I don't know that I would give up all 3 of those guys for AJ Brown, but if you have the depth, I don't mind it because of the fact that you're buying low on AJ Brown and he is such a difference maker. We haven't seen the same passing proficiency from the Eagles yet. I think they're figuring out their play calling, and Hurts is figuring out what he's doing in that offense now. So I think you're buying low, but that's a really heavy price. My gut is to say no, but if you're super deep and you can afford to, then I'm always for trading 3 pieces for 1 when you're getting the 1 and he's a stud.
Just the question if he is the one. I think that's just the question there. Sure. Draco Juice says, I have Gus Edwards, Algier, Breida, P. Ryan, and Pierce. Needs to start 2 of these.
Oh, I know how you're feeling right now, Draco. I have these similar questions. So I think I'm going to take P. Ryan out of there just because of the fact that he didn't touch the ball in the first half last week. That really concerns me. I don't know what happened there because in week 1, he was getting a lot of the high leverage work, the short down and distance, long down and distance passing work. And I don't know what happened this past week. So I want to see what the usage is like for Denver going forward before I do that again. And Tyler Algier, he came in and got some goal line carries in week 1. Week 2, that flipped to Bijan Robinson. And at this point, if Algier isn't getting those inside the 10 rushes like he did week 1, and also he's got the tough matchup, as I already mentioned, with Detroit, I'm Xing him out as well. So how many does he need? 2?
Just 2.
2. So I think, as odd as it may sound, I think I'm going back to the well with Dameon Pierce, even though he hasn't been playing very well. And I think I'm going to go with Matt Breida because Gus Edwards is really touchdown dependent. Even though he had 12 points this past week, he only got 10 carries. And despite managing 60 yards on it, he scored, which made his day look all right. But you're going to get a lot of 3 to 6 point games out of Gus Edwards. I'd rather go for the upside with Breida and hope he catches some passes. And then let's see what Dameon Pierce does for 1 more week.
Yep. A decent matchup against Jacksonville. So I think that maybe they fix some things. All right. Last question. And I apologize to those that we did not get to. You can hit us up on Twitter. I think both of our sites have asking services and, of course, ranking. Of course, we always have weekly rankings to consult as well. But Department Thug says, should I trade Jalen Hurts for Josh Jacobs and Kirk Cousins? Already has Jefferson and Hawkinson. He has Gibbs, Walker, Brian Robinson, and Gus Edwards as his backs. So does he need that upgrade at running back enough to downgrade that much at quarterback and then have the correlation there? I don't know. I think I'd probably hold on to Hurts. What say you?
I'd hold on to Hurts too. Josh Jacobs hasn't been very impressive either. And if we go back to next gen stats, he's also one of the lowest in the league over 2 games. Now, I know he had a bad game last week, so that's skewing the results a little bit, but he is also one of the lowest in rush yards over expected through 2 games. And I think that's one of the things that we see when a guy touches the ball 400 times the previous year is that he's a little bit dead the next year. And that's what we're seeing so far. I'm not saying that that's going to hold up for 17 weeks. Maybe he's all right. Maybe it's just a brutal matchup, but I don't like it enough to go trade for him. I think you're quote unquote buying low, but you're also buying high on Kirk Cousins, who's had a mental 2 weeks to start the season. I just wouldn't do that. I'd hold on to Hurts. If Hurts was doing the things that he did last year, going crazy, you wouldn't want to do that. So just wait for Hurts to break out. He got a couple touchdowns this past week. It's coming for Jalen Hurts.
Indeed. I 100% agree with that. We're going to wrap it up with that. Again, you can hit us up on Twitter. I'm at Jeff_Erickson. Drew's at Drew Davenport FF. He also does the Fantasy Football Lawyer. It's his Patreon. He's at Football Guys. He's got his show, the Auction Brief podcast. All of these are outlets you can ask these questions. Of course, consult our expert services, our lineup questions to do our lineup ranking system for those that we did not get to. Apologize, can't possibly get to all of them. I appreciate the volume here. It was really good stuff. Drew, really good stuff. Thank you so much for spending an hour of your time with me and your expertise and your wisdom.
Hey, Jeff, I really appreciate you, giving me a chance to get that stuff out there that I'm working on. So thank you very much for that. And thank you for the invite. I had a blast talking about all that stuff.
It's always fun talking football. I love doing it there. All right. That's Drew Davenport, everybody. Tune in tomorrow. We've got John and Mario. Thanks again for listening to RotoWire. Take care.